Thank you. And thank you so much for having me here. It's been so incredibly inspiring to hear the presentations. And indeed, today I'm here because I want to talk to you about unleashing the innate greatness of your team so that you can bring all these inspiring missions and visions to life. Because, here is the thing. To deliver, for example, faster and more accurate diagnosis for schizophrenia patients, you'll need to figure out how to create a work environment where people can achieve great results, or to create a truly great tool to forecast the true costs of software development. You'll need your team to be innovative, resilient, and engaged. And I think that actually all the startups present here today are working on a very ambitious, inspiring mission. And I think that there is only one way to deliver on it with success, by creating a culture where people do their best work. And so let's talk about ambitious missions for a second. So back in 1960, right after JFK declared the United States was going to put humans on the moon, NASA realized that they would need an army of unbelievably gifted individuals to make it happen. And so they turned to a guy named George Land. And basically what they said is, George, can you please help us find the boldest, the brightest, and the most brilliant minds? Because obviously this mission is not going to be easy to pull off. And Land created a test. And it was a test that basically measured creative capacity of an individual and of the individual's ability to access their creative genius and to produce their best work. And as we all know, it was a pretty effective test because somehow the collective of the wildly creative humans managed to pull off this spectacular breakthrough for humanity. And after this successful mission was realized and NASA managed to put the first man on the moon, George Land had to decide what project he was going to work on next. But the thing was, for him, he wasn't quite ready to move on. That creativity test that he had created for NASA, it really felt like he wasn't done with it yet. And so on a whim, he decides to try it on a bunch of 5-year-olds. And he gathers over 1,600 kids, and he gives them the exact same test that he'd given to astrophysicists and engineers and psychologists and lunar specialists. And this is what he finds out. 98% of 5-year-olds could be classified as creative geniuses. They had exactly the same level of creativity as the most innovative minds at NASA, the ones that put us on the moon in 1969. And keep in mind that these children, they were not from NASA School for the Gifted, right? They were not composing symphonies while eating lunch or writing sonnets. They were ordinary, everyday kids with snotty noses and grubby knees, kids, I assume, like you and me once were. So George Land, astounded by the results, decides to make this test into longitudinal study. And he brings the same group of kids back to do the same test under the same conditions 5 years later. So now the kids are 10 years old. And here's the first challenge here for you. Please try to guess, okay? And maybe tap it in chat. What percentage of 10-year-old kids could be classified as creative geniuses? And don't forget, this is the same group of kids that he tested first, the same group of kids that 98% of them were creative geniuses. So maybe type in chat, is it 95%, you think? 80%? 65? 30?
I see some people say 30.
30. Well, pretty good, I have to say. It was indeed 30. And now George Land is really intrigued because that's a major drop, right? And so he decides to measure the kids again at 15. Same kids, same test, same conditions. And guess what? The number dropped again, this time to 12%. And so he says, okay, let's measure them one more time, the final time. Now they are 30 years old, and many of them have kids of their own. And here is the depressing finding. The results showed that only 2% of participants could be classified as brilliantly creative. And so George Land discovered something important, something really important for all of you here. And this is what he said about his research. He said, my research is conclusive now. Non-creative behavior, it's learned. And it's actually the conditions and the environment in which we grow up and in which we operate that block our innate greatness. Now, what this means is that all of your team members, the current ones and the future ones, they have been creative geniuses at some point in their lives. And your job as the founder, as the leader, is basically to help them unlock that greatness. And the big question, of course, now is, okay, but how do I do that? How do you create a culture where people can do their best work and they can bring their best selves to that culture? And this is actually a question that has been at the center of my work for the past 20 years. I really, really, really wanted to know, what do people need to achieve greatness at work, both as individuals, but also as teams? And so I started researching successful startups and scale-ups, and I asked people a certain question. In fact, my team and I, we asked this question to almost 3,000 people now. We said, tell me about a time you did your best work. And all of these people were from startups and scale-ups. And here's the first interesting finding. When you ask people about the time they did their best work, one thing happens every single time. Without fail, people smile. In fact, their faces literally light up. And that's because human beings find great joy in doing great work. And actually, research shows that one of the most satisfying experiences that we can have is transcending our own limitations and achieving something that we initially perceived out of reach. So doing great work is one of the life experiences that helps us come truly alive. So when you create a work culture where people can do great work so that you can bring your vision to life, you are not only helping your business to succeed, you're actually helping people on your team to feel truly alive. And if that's not worth working towards, honestly, I don't know what else is. So great team cultures, the ones that allow your team members to reclaim their creative genius, that provide people with a deep sense of fun and meaning and belonging, these are the thriving cultures. And these are the three pillars that we have discovered in our research, that in companies that have great results and where people can really bring their best selves to work, they are built on these three pillars. And they might sound quite straightforward, and maybe you might shrug your shoulders and say, that doesn't sound like something new. Let me dive a little bit deeper to give you a little bit more details about these pillars. I want to start with fun because, especially in the startup world, it's, I think, the most misunderstood term. Fun is actually not about ping pong tables or football or yoga or, I don't know, Friday pizza parties. It's not even about having fun at work. It's about having fun with the work that we are doing. So deep fun that great cultures are built on is really about the sense of joy that people derive from work itself. And in our research, we've discovered three main drivers for a sense of deep fun at work. And the first one is flow. And it's all about the sense of focused attention on a task that we are performing. It's those moments that I know you all experienced when it feels like time stops and the world around us just literally dissolves and it's just you and the thing that you are doing. And for the flow, this kind of flow to occur, we need a couple of things. We need a stretch task, and we also need some space for deep work and uninterrupted flow. So here's a quick tip on how you can bring more flow to yourself, but also to your team at work. Have less meetings. Eliminate some meetings. You don't need so many meetings, I promise you. What you do need is you need to give your people the space to do creative work. And we cannot do creative work on a Zoom call, right? It's really not the right kind of environment. So try to eliminate distractions, guard your personal deep work time, but also respect that others need it as well. And when it comes to the second driver of fun, it's the old good humor. It's about sharing moments of levity. It's about laughter, because these things help teams think, connect. They allow our brains to enter creative zone. And frankly, personally, when I see teams that laugh together, I know that they are already primed to solve wicked problems together, because humor allows us to escape the amygdala hijack and the stress, and brings us into the place of creativity. And this is the right moment to talk about the third driver, which is playfulness. And this is when we get to be really creative at work. It's when we can ask all the what if questions and play with identifying new and better ways of doing things. So in order for you to create a great company culture, I would suggest think about how you can nurture deep fun at work. Forget about the ping pong tables, but think about those three things. How can I create more flow? How can I generate and create more humor in the workplace? And how can I create an environment where we can be playful and not so serious about how we approach solving problems? And here is a second pillar that I talked about. This is actually the most essential element. This is an element without which you really don't have a team. What you have is a random collection of insecure and confused individuals where politics might rule, or where people are experiencing way too much friction. Everything suddenly becomes way too hard. And the truth is, all high-performing teams in the world, they have incredibly high sense of belonging. Think about Navy SEALs, think about teams at Google. Belonging is their thing, really. And in its essence, belonging is about being a part of a supportive community at work. When I put belonging under a microscope, I realized that it consists of three key elements. And here they are: individuality, safety, and shared identity. So number one, to feel like you belong, first and foremost, you need to feel seen and valued for who you are as a person, not the skills that you bring, not the technical expertise. You need to feel like, you are valued for who you are as a human being, that you can speak up, that you can challenge the status quo without fear of consequences. And finally, you need to have this sense of shared identity. And you can say, this is who we are, and this is what we stand for. And I actually feel proud to belong here. So quick tip again for all the founders and all the leaders and all the teams here today. If you want to create a sense of belonging for your team, I suggest first, get to know each of your team members as a person. Look behind the skills, behind the role, and find out who they really, really are. And seek to understand them at a deep human level. Someone once said that understanding is just a different word for love. And if you can make people feel seen, heard, and understood, you have already done most of the groundwork that is required for a great company culture. And second tip, how to cultivate a sense of belonging. Codify your culture. Create that shared identity that is going to attract the right talent and keep the right talent in your company. Most founders and most companies that are still small, startups, they think, well, maybe it's too early for us to think about those things. But if you don't have core values yet, you should. You really should, because it's important. You don't want your culture to evolve by chance. You want your culture to be cultivated by design. And if you identify who you are, what you stand for, what your core values are, it really is going to be a game changer. So that is my second tip about creating a sense of belonging. And since I started with the original moonshot mission, let me finish with it. So in 1962, JFK was visiting NASA, and the story goes that as he was walking the corridors, he noticed a janitor who was carrying a broom and cleaning something. And JFK interrupted his tour. He walked over to the janitor and he introduced himself. He said, "Hey, I'm Jack Kennedy. What are you doing here?" And the janitor responded, "I'm helping put a man on the moon, Mr. President." Now, I don't know whether this is a true story or not. Who knows? Urban myth, perhaps. But what I do know is that we all crave a sense of meaning at work, and we all want to feel a part of something larger than us. And really great organizations and teams, they help their people to see exactly how they're contributing to an important mission, even if what all they do is just sweeping the floors. So when we talk about meaning at work, again, 3 elements. The first one is people want to know that through the job that they're doing, they're going to be able to meet their personal goals and aspirations. And so as a leader, you need to know what their goals and aspirations are. And then your job is to identify ways for them to meet those goals and aspirations. We also get meaning when we experience the impact of our work on others. And finally, we experience a sense of meaning when we can contribute to a shared goal or an important cause. But I want to zoom into the second one for a second, because this is something that can create an incredibly positive domino effect in your company culture. It will make a vast difference to a sense of meaning that everyone experiences in your company. Because when I did a deep dive into my research data, I discovered that there was a vast difference in performance between people who worked in isolation and felt more or less like a cog in the machine, and those who knew how their work benefited someone, their colleague or another important stakeholder. In some cases, the impact on the performance was massive. There was a huge difference. So again, a really quick tip. If you want to increase a sense of meaning for your team, I would say give people that line of sight. Really help them to see for themselves how they are making a difference. And also, don't forget to express your appreciation for their contributions, because people want to know that you see it and the work that they're doing, it really has meaning. So that was a crash course on the 3 pillars of thriving cultures. And here's a final thought I'd like to leave with you. And I want to say this: it's never too early to start working on your company culture, because the environment that your people work in, it really, really matters. It can make or break your business. And here is a beautiful illustration of this concept. Antonis Tsapatakis, he is a Greek Paralympic swimmer, and he's standing next to his wheelchair, not because his spinal cord injury was cured, but because he's in the environment that makes it possible. And I hope that all of you succeed in creating an environment for your team where the impossible becomes possible. And if you are intrigued by the topic, we share much more on cultivating a thriving culture on LinkedIn. So please follow us. And thank you, everyone.